What if the two people you trusted with your life were the two people destroying it? David was the kind of man that made other men feel ashamed of themselves. Not because he was wealthy, not because he was loud or impressive, but because of how he lived, quietly, faithfully, without compromise. He prayed every morning before his feet touched the floor. He kept his word even when it cost him. He loved his wife the way his father taught him, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. He married Sarah at 26. She was 24, bright-eyed and full of laughter, the kind of woman who made a house feel like a home just by being in it. It was an early marriage. People raised eyebrows, but David was certain. He had never been more certain of anything. At the altar, his best friend Marcus stood beside him, straightening his tie. "You are the luckiest man alive," Marcus whispered. David smiled. "I know." And he meant it. He truly meant it. The first year was everything they had imagined. Small apartment, big dreams, laughter in the kitchen at midnight. Sarah will talk about children, her eyes lighting up every time, painting pictures of a family, a full table, a house alive with small feet running across the floor. "Soon," David always said, "when we're more stable, we have time." Then the promotion came. More money, more security, everything David had worked for. But it came with one condition: travel. Constant, unrelenting travel. 2 weeks gone, 4 days home. Sometimes a full month on another continent, surviving on phone calls and promises. Sarah stood at the door every time he left, arms folded, eyes carrying something she never said out loud. David always looked back at her before turning the corner. Always. He told himself it was temporary. He told himself he was doing it for them. He told himself she understood. He was wrong about all three. The house grew quiet in ways Sarah hadn't prepared for. She cooked meals and ate alone. She lay in bed listening to a silence so heavy it had weight. She called David, but time zones swallowed their conversations whole. 3 minutes, maybe 5, then, "The meeting is starting, I'll call you back." He rarely called back. She wanted a child more than she had ever wanted anything. Something to wake up for, something to fill the silence. But David was never home long enough, and every month that passed felt like a small door closing. And then there was Marcus. He had been around so long he was practically furniture. David's best friend since secondary school, the kind of man who showed up for everything and disappeared for nothing. When his own marriage ended 2 years earlier, David had opened their door without a second thought. "Stay as long as you need. This is your home too." So Marcus stayed. And when David traveled, Marcus was there. Dinner at the table, movies on the couch, conversations that stretched past midnight because silence was unbearable and company was warm. He made her laugh. He listened, really listened. And to a woman starving for presence, that kind of attention was dangerous. Sarah told herself it was just friendship. She told herself that every single day. But the night David's call ended in 3 minutes, the night he said, "I'll call you back," and never did, Sarah sat at the kitchen table and wept. And Marcus found her there. And this time, neither of them pulled away. The affair did not announce itself. It moved in slowly, the way mold grows behind a wall. Invisible, quiet, spreading through everything before anyone notices the damage. For 12 months, the secret lived inside David's house, at his table, in his rooms, under the roof he paid for with every exhausting trip, every missed dinner, every night he chose work over coming home. Marcus looked David in the eyes each time he returned, shook his hand firmly, laughed at his jokes, called him brother. And David, loyal,
trusting, completely unsuspecting David looked right back and saw only family. Sarah played her part with a precision that should have broken her. She cooked his favorite meals on the nights he came home. She held him in bed. She smiled at the right moments and said the right things. But something behind her eyes lived somewhere he could no longer reach. He noticed a distance, but he read it wrong. He thought she was tired. He thought she needed more comfort, more provision. So he worked harder, traveled more, believed that giving her a better life would bring her back to him. He was building a house for a woman who had already left without moving. Then one morning, 6 months into the affair, Sarah sat on the bathroom floor. She already knew before the test confirmed it. She had been waiting for a child for years, praying for one, aching for one, and now here it was. But the joy lasted exactly 4 seconds, because the child was not David's. She sat there for a long time in complete silence. Then she stood, buried the test at the bottom of the bin, and made a decision she would spend the rest of her life paying for. She said nothing. She told no one. She carried the secret like a stone in her chest and kept walking. When she told David she was pregnant, he dropped to his knees in the middle of the living room and thanked God out loud, tears streaming down his face. "I'm going to be a father," he whispered. Marcus was in the hallway. He heard every word. He stepped forward, pulled David into a hug and said, "Congratulations, brother," with a steady voice and a still face. That night, Sarah stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. She could not recognize the woman looking back. 9 months later, Ada arrived. She came into the world screaming and perfect, soft skin, clenched fists, eyes that held the whole universe. David held her in the delivery room and came completely undone. This composed, steady man wept openly, kissing Sarah's forehead over and over, whispering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." He called his mother. He called the pastor. He bought a cake. He named her Ada, first daughter, and from that moment she owned him entirely. He reduced his travel. He came home more. He sang to Ada at night and prayed over her every morning, his large hand resting gently on her small chest. He was, by every measure, the most devoted father anyone had ever seen, loving a child with everything in him, completely unaware that the child was not his. And Marcus watched all of it and said nothing. Ada was 1 year old when the fever came. It started like any ordinary sickness, but it did not leave. And when the doctors delivered their verdict, they said David needed to donate blood immediately. He rolled up his sleeve without hesitation. This man who would give everything for his daughter. The doctor came back into the room. His face said it all before his mouth opened. "Mr. David, I need to speak with you privately." David followed the doctor into a side room, unhurried, still calm. He assumed it was a formality, a medical technicality, something easily resolved. The doctor placed the result on the table and explained it plainly. The blood did not match, not marginally, not the kind of difference that leaves room for error or exception. It was the kind of result that closes every other door and leaves only one explanation standing. David stared at the paper for a long time. Then he picked it up, folded it once, and walked back into the waiting room where Sarah sat with Ada against her chest. He placed the paper on her lap without a word. He watched her face, watched the color drain from it, watched her eyes fall to the result, then close. Watched her lips part with nothing coming out. He had seen Sarah in many moments, joy, fear, anger, grief, but he had never seen this. This was the face of someone watching their entire story collapse. "How long?" he asked. His voice was completely steady. Sarah broke. It came out in fragments. The loneliness, the silence, the months of empty rooms and unanswered calls, Marcus, the year, the pregnancy, every single piece she had buried now surfacing all at once. She tried to explain. She tried to give it context, shape, reason. I was lonely. I was desperate. It was never supposed to. David raised one hand. She stopped. He sat with it all for a long moment, eyes forward, jaw tight. Then he stood up, walked to Marcus in the corridor. Marcus, who had been sitting there this whole time, pretending to scroll his phone, pretending to be just a concerned friend. And David stopped directly in front of him. Marcus looked up. For the first time in a year, he could not hold eye contact. David looked at him for a long, quiet moment, taking in the face he had known for over 20 years. The man who had stood beside him at his wedding, the man he had sheltered, fed, welcomed as family, the man who had sat at his table, called him brother, and looked him in the eyes every day for 12 months. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. Get out of my house. 4 words, quiet as a prayer, heavy as a verdict. Sarah packed a bag with shaking hands. Ada pressed against her shoulder. She tried once more at the door. David, please. He held the door open and said nothing. She left. Marcus followed without a word, without turning back. David closed the door. The house had never been so silent. He walked through each room slowly. The kitchen, where they had eaten together. The living room, where Marcus had laughed at his jokes. The corridor, where Sarah had stood and watched him leave 100 times. He walked until he reached Ada's room, the room he had painted himself, the crib he had assembled piece by piece on a Saturday morning, the small mobile of stars still turning slowly above it, catching the light. He sat down on the floor beneath it, and for the first time since the doctor's office, he wept. Not in rage, not in self-pity. He wept for Ada, who had done nothing, who had smiled at him with her whole face, who had reached for him in the night and held his finger and held on with a grip far too strong for something so small. A child he had prayed over and sung to and loved without measure. A child who would never know what she had been to him. Weeks passed, then a month. David had rebuilt his silence into something resembling peace. Then one evening, there was a knock at the door. He opened it. Sarah was standing there, alone. No bags, no Marcus. And in her eyes was something he had never seen before. Not guilt, not desperation. It was fear. David, she said quietly, Ada is getting worse. The doctors say she won't survive without a matched donor. Marcus isn't a match either. She paused. You are the only one who came close. He let her stand in the doorway for a long moment. Every reasonable part of him had the right to close the door. The world would have understood it. No one would have blamed him, not after everything. He owed nothing to a child conceived in betrayal under his own roof. He owed nothing to the woman who had smiled at him every morning for a year while carrying that secret. He owed nothing, and yet he stepped aside and let her in. She sat across from him and explained what the doctors had said. Ada's condition had worsened significantly. The specific blood type required was rare. Marcus had been tested and ruled out. Extended family had been tested. No match had been found. David was the closest result they had. I know I have no right to ask you, Sarah said. Her voice had none of its old warmth. It was stripped bare, the voice of someone who had already lost everything and was standing in the wreckage asking for one more thing. I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for her. David was quiet for a long time. He thought about Ada's hands, how small they were, how she used to curl her fingers around his thumb in the night like she was anchoring herself to him. How she laughed at nothing, that sudden explosive baby laughter that filled the room completely. How she had looked at him with complete trust, the way only children look at the people they believe will never let them fall. She had not chosen any of this. She had not chosen her father, had not chosen the lie she was born into, had not chosen the adults who were supposed to protect her, and instead protected only themselves. She was innocent in a way no one else in this story was. David went to the hospital the next morning. He did not call ahead. He did not send a message. He simply arrived, spoke to the medical team, and sat in the chair. He rolled up his sleeve, and he gave what was needed, not because he had forgiven, not because the wound had closed, not because anyone had earned it, but because of who he was. Because a man's character is not what he shows when life is easy. It is what remains when everything has been taken. The procedure worked. Ada stabilized within days. The doctors called it a remarkable recovery. There was celebration in the ward, nurses smiling, monitors beeping steadily, a little girl breathing easy who had not been breathing easy for weeks. David was not there for it. He had already gone home. Sarah sent one message. "She's going to be okay. Thank you, David. I don't deserve this. I know that." He read it once. He did not reply. What was there to say? The marriage was over. The friendship was over. The life he had built on trust and faith and loyalty had come apart at every seam. Those things could not be unsaid or undone. Forgiveness, if it ever came, would come slowly and privately, between him and God, not between Sarah and David. But Ada was alive, and somehow, in the middle of all that ruin, that felt like the only thing that mattered. He sat in his living room that evening, the house quiet around him, and he opened his Bible to no particular page. He sat there for a long time, not reading, not praying in words, just sitting with God the way a man sits with someone who already knows everything and does not need to be told. He had lost a wife. He had lost a best friend. He had lost a daughter he never truly had, but he had not lost himself. He was still the man who kept his word, still the man who showed up, still the man who, when the moment came, chose the harder and better thing, not because anyone was watching, but because he did not know how to be any other way. Some men are broken by betrayal. David was revealed by it.